Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Loud, unfiltered, and live nationwide. It's the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central.
This is the year, even in a first-year system with Mike McCarthy, that Dallas has to win the NFC East. They have to. If Dallas doesn't win the NFC East this year, something is majorly wrong.
Want to chime in? Join the live chat on either Facebook or Twitter at Cream City Central. Your comment could be featured on today's show. From the WWSP 90 FM studios in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, here's Alex Strouf.
Oh, yeah, baby. On a Thursday, June 18th, 2020, this is the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central. Thanks so much for hopping in with us today, as we've got lots to jump into. Big day, or so we thought, in the world of baseball, and we'll get to that here shortly. But producer Kyle is on the sticks back in Green Bay. He joins me as always. We've got Andy Herman of PackReport.com, as well as the founder of Pack-A-Day Podcast, joining at 3:30 later this hour. And to kick off next hour, man, it's the conversation I've been looking forward to since it was confirmed to me last week. We will have the brand new head coach of the UW Green Bay men's basketball team. His name is Will Ryan, the son of Bo Ryan. He will join us at 4 o'clock sharp to discuss his new position, what it's been like for him the course of the last 2 weeks. So that's will be a really fun conversation here. Later, we've got some really stupid comments coming out of Chicago that we'll get into in hour number one yet. And hour number two, we've got lots of things to talk about football-wise, as we'll do all that early in hour two. And we'll, of course, do Fight Night as we do each Thursday. Michael Bowling, all the way in Delaware, will join me today to discuss the best division in the NFC. I went with the NFC South. He went with the NFC West, which a lot of you went with. Almost unanimous, it seemed, that the NFC West was a big favorite for some reason, which I don't agree with. I just don't, and we'll get into that more in hour two. But let's introduce producer Kyle, all the way in Green Bay. Hi, Kyle. How are you, my friend? Is your microphone unmuted?
Microphone is on. I hit unmute. We are good to go.
Yes, we did it finally.
Yeah.
How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Rearranged my set a little bit.
I see that.
Yeah. I got my Giovanni Gallardo. My dad's Giovanni Gallardo. Not mine. My dad's Giovanni Gallardo jersey for all those Brewers fans out there. Yeah. So closer to the window, so I got more natural light coming in. So
wow, really take us through the dynamic of your setup. That's unbelievable.
That's as far as I'll go. You'll see the bobbleheads next to me too. So I do.
So while we're talking baseball, real quick, before we get into everything that's happened today, which is a lot, and I'm probably going to miss a lot of it, but I'll nail as much as I can. Where's your confidence level? Give me a percentage that there's baseball played in 2020, because obviously we've had stuff develop since Tuesday when we talked to Tom Hodgercourt. We were guaranteed there wasn't going to be a season, we thought, or so we thought. Now some more developments. Where's your percentage lie that there will be a baseball season?
It's been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I would say probably Monday morning I was at about 65, 70% there would be a season. By
Okay.
Tuesday, by the time we were doing the show, talking to Tom, I was down to about 5%. I don't think you can be either 100% or 0% on this because you just don't know.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we had breaking news today. Jeff Passan tweeted out that the MLB Players Association, which we'll get to, but I want to just share it now at the top, proposed a 70-game MLB season to start to start the 2020 season.
Yeah.
That has been, I guess, since flat out just laughed at by the owners that they don't want to do it.
Yeah, we'll get there.
At about 1:30 this afternoon, I was back up to like a 65-70%.
Oh.
Now I'm down to like 25-30 because I
haven't wavered.
Yeah.
I haven't wavered at all. I'm still at about 15-20%. I still don't think there's a season. I'll explain why, but that's producer Kyle. He'll be with us all afternoon long. And I'm obviously Alex Strouf. This is the Alex Strouf Show on Cream City Central, and you can find us on Twitter at Cream City Central. Let's dive into today's Twitter question.
It's the Strouf Show Twitter question.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Chime in on today's topic at Cream City Central on Twitter.
So today's Strouf Show Twitter poll is the following. Do you support a designated hitter in both the American and National League? So our friend Tom Hodgecourt, who was on Tuesday, broke this yesterday that once an agreement comes to terms between the owners and the Players Association, that a designated hitter is very, very likely. And so we want to know, are you good with this? Are you cool with this? Are you a normal human being and you give this the thumbs up like a normal human being should? And 66% of you are a normal human being. 66% as we stand right now say yes, all for the designated hitter in both leagues, where 24% of you almost say no, while roughly 11% of you say I just don't care, which I guess I can get with that too. But look, overall, the designated hitter thing is something that I've dived into this before, not on this platform, of course, but I've gotten into this before, and my stance since I was like 7 years old remains unchanged. Because look, I look at it this way. With this new CBA agreement, it will likely be implemented right away when we get a season, assuming we do in 2020. And then obviously the CBA agreement for 2021, we'll see, and that will be included in that as well. So the ages of no designated hitter in the National League is over. And while scrolling Twitter last night after Tom reported this news, it was, well, this is a sad day for baseball. This is horrible. The end of an era. This isn't the game I once knew. Right? I mean, seriously. How absolutely dumb in the brain do you have to be to sit here and act like a designated hitter in the National League ruins baseball? Now, if you're such a big baseball fan, tell me this. Why do, in the World Series, the biggest stage that baseball has, why does the National League have a designated hitter? Why, when we mingle interleague play, right, when an AL team plays an NL team, why does magically the National League team get a designated hitter? Because it's an advantage offensively, right? And you don't want an uneven playing field between AL and NL opponents. So to say this is the end of an era, it's just dumb, especially with everything that's gone on the last several weeks in baseball, right? This is a dying sport. Baseball is. The Major League Baseball is a dying league. And I'm not saying it's going to ultimately have a funeral, never exist. Of course not. The MLB is still going to rake in millions and billions of dollars each season once we get back to at least what we hope is normal. But Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, who we talked a lot about on Tuesday, is currently letting this sport die with all this playground-like back and forth happening out loud on Twitter, on Facebook, through press releases. He's holding a pillow to us in bed and suffocating the sport. That's what Rob Manfred is doing. So the fact that you don't like a designated hitter in the National League, and maybe you do, and I hope you do, because I agree with you. we already see it a lot with interleague play and obviously the World Series. We don't like watching pitchers strike out. I know the Yankees don't like watching their pitchers strike out because they don't really get the opportunity to. The Red Sox don't like watching pitchers strike out because they typically don't get the opportunity to. Astros fans, Orioles fans, Mariners fans, Tigers fans, you name it, don't watch their pitchers strike out because that's typically what happens, unless you want to talk about sack bunts. But otherwise, pitchers go in there and strike out. They whiff because that's not what they're good at. They're good at throwing the baseball. So the designated hitter slot being implemented in the National League is nothing to really scoff at. It's nothing to say, ugh, this is a bad day for the game. This is horrible. This isn't the game me and my poppy grew up watching. Like, seriously? Get over yourself. It will just add a fun, little, tiny element. An element you'll see 3 times in a 4-hour game. Maybe 4 times, depending how many times we go through the batting order. It's not going to change baseball at all. We're just not going to see pitchers maybe, 3 times a season hit a home run. It's the one difference we're getting. It's just going to create a better product. It doesn't give you that false hope for when your 9 batter comes up that, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's not going to go well, is it? When you're 2 outs and have nobody on in the 9th inning. At overall, the designated hitter belongs in baseball. We see it at the collegiate level. We see it at the high school level. We see it in the minor league level. The only level we don't consistently see the designated hitter spot is the majors. In the National League. That's it. There are literally 15 teams in the country that don't regularly use a designated hitter. And those teams belong to the NL East, the NL West, and the NL Central. That's it. Anywhere else you go watch baseball, the Northwoods League, the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, the Beloit Snappers, the minor league teams in Wisconsin, you have a designated hitter in those games. So for you to sit here and tell me that this is a sad day for baseball, you're wrong. Anywhere else you watch baseball, there is a designated hitter universally. Wisconsin high school baseball, guess what? Designated hitter. Wisconsin D1 college baseball at Milwaukee. There's a DH. D3, where I'm sitting, Stevens Point. There's a DH. Single A baseball, the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. There's a DH. But there's only not a DH for the 15 teams in the National League, even though when we play interleague play, there's a DH. When we go to the World Series, there's a DH, which is when the most eyes are ever on baseball in a calendar year. There is a DH on both teams playing. So don't sit here and tell me that this forever will be a sad day in baseball when we eliminate pitchers hitting. And sometimes, there is some pitchers who are good at swinging the bat. But in most cases, there will be a designated hitter. And that makes a great case for guys like Ryan Braun or Eric Thames, who's no longer on the team, or for the Brewers, I believe. But when he was and wasn't really playing, it's a great guy to throw in the DH spot. A guy that can swing the bat with power, swing it to the fences. This is good for baseball. This is not a bad day for baseball. This is not a sad day for baseball. This is not eliminating what you and your grandpa used to watch in the 1960s. This is a good day for baseball, which is a dying brand. Baseball is no longer on a lot of people's radars, especially what's going on the last 2 weeks. I'll still gladly talk about baseball, but how much interest have not only I lost, but you also lost in the product of Major League Baseball in the last, month or 2? You're sick of it. I said on Tuesday, I don't even know if I want a season anymore. This is just dramatic and childlike. That's why we dubbed Rob Manfred on the Rugrats theme song on Tuesday. Is because it's childlike. It's childlike. Now, let's get into this proposal made by the MLB Players Association and Tony Clark, who is the head of the MLBPA. they sent a 70-game proposal to Major League Baseball today. It includes, from Tony Clark, it says this: we delivered to Major League Baseball today a counter proposal based on a 70-game regular season, which, among a number of issues, includes expanded playoffs for both 2020 and 2021. We believe this offer represents the basis for an agreement on resumption of play, end quote. So that's what the MLB proposal was. Now, this is a $250 million difference with the latest proposal compared to the owner's last proposal, which we recently talked about. Now, this is a difference of $250 million for roughly 30 billionaire owners who have an investment in Major League Baseball. Now, as I said before, once we get back to what we assume will be our normal, this will be a for-profit league. You will go back to making millions on hundreds of millions of dollars every season on ticket sales and merch sales, et cetera, et cetera. So what the owners need to do is buckle down and realize that this is the best route to go. And although the players 2 days removed are no longer saying, tell us when and where, because that clearly wasn't working, they throw this at them. But I don't see this being accepted. And as reports have come out from a couple names, Bob Nightingale being the big one, this isn't going to be accepted. It's not going to be accepted. I still don't think we get baseball no matter what patio meeting in Arizona goes down, in reference to the patio meeting that Rob Manfred and Tony Clark had earlier this week. No matter what we talk about over daiquiris on my patio in Arizona, we're not having a season. And this isn't me being a pessimist. This is me being a realist. If we get a season, it's going to come maybe tomorrow or Friday. Or excuse me, tomorrow or Monday. This just looks horrible. And Rob Manfred will be the first one to tell you that. What does this look like for the sport, Rob?
It's just a disaster for our game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a disaster for the game. And although nobody can step out of their own comfort zone and their own, they're all put themselves on pedestals because these are billionaire owners, mostly. Antasanio of the Brewers' net worth is about $700 million, so he's not quite to the billionaire level in the smallest market in Major League Baseball, but the rest of them mainly are. And it's unbelievable that there's been so much back and forth where the optics that Rob Manfred just alluded to, it's disgusting. And your dedicated fans, like myself, are just burnt out. This is a dying league because Rob Manfred and a bunch of these owners, I'm not saying every owner, but a bunch of these owners don't have their thumb on the pulse of the league and its fans. Rob Manfred can sit here and tell me all day long that they want to get back on the field for the fans, but I don't believe that. They want to get back on the field to the point where they don't lose a lot of money. Now, do I get that from a business perspective? Sure. But don't act like you're dedicated and that you're 100% certain there's going to be a season when obviously you're not, Rob Manfred. Obviously, you are not 100% certain. So as you just saw on our screen, if you're watching the multicast, Bob Nightingale reported earlier this afternoon, the owners appear dead set on 60 games for the season. And John Heyman, who one of the best baseball beat reporters in the game, tweeted about just over an hour ago, one owner's response to players' proposal today, quote, DOA, unquote, dead on arrival. It's not happening. We're not getting a 70-game season. The easy solution for this, I'll offer it. Nobody's going to run with it because all they want to do is fight over Twitter and press releases. All they want to do is send press releases and fight. That's all the MLB, the Players Association, the owners, that's all they want to do. Even though the optics are disgusting and horrible, as Rob Manfred said, this is all they want to do. The solution is you meet in the middle. 65 games. Do that. Done. Prorated salaries. Do it in a bubble until we get to the playoffs. There's a solution in the MLBPA's pitch today for the expanded playoff to make sure the World Series happens even if we have a spike in cases. Take a break. We'll do it here then. they're determined to get a season done because obviously the players want their salaries. Obviously, the owners want to make some money, even though they will lose money. They want to lose the least they can. Eventually, these owners, what they have to do is man up and take the loss. You're going to lose money no matter what. I'll say it one more time and even slower for you, owners. You have to man up and realize you're going to lose money because your stadiums won't be able to be full and you're going to have a shortened season. You're going to lose money. And although they've probably accepted that in some capacity, it's clearly not in through their thick skulls that the best answer is to listen to the Players Association at least a little bit. We're going to get a counter. We're going to get a counter solution, another counter solution, another counter solution, another counter solution to the point where it's too late. And that's truthfully what I believe will happen. I don't think we have a season. Still, I'm still pretty dead set on that. Let's go to producer Kyle now. Kyle, help me make sense of this a little bit.
So I want to read this tweet that I was scrolling through as you were speaking your mind.
Yeah.
Jen McCaffrey, Red Sox beat reporter for The Athletic, describes this whole entire situation to a T, absolutely perfectly. This MLB/MLB Players Association negotiation process is like driving around town wasting gas in order to find the gas station that is 1 cent cheaper.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
That's actually a great
analogy. That is great. I'm glad. Shout out to Erin Nagler for retweeting that so I could actually see it because I don't follow her on Twitter.
Right.
I am now because of that tweet.
Yes, that's a great tweet.
So, like, the word I go back to, the single word to describe this entire situation is incompetency.
Yep. It has been.
Everybody's losing money. There is no. What are you trying to salvage?
Right.
A couple, maybe $1 million or so for each franchise.
Right.
Okay, well, not only are you trying to do that, but you're making yourself look like idiots in the process. You're losing fans by the minute, and you're making yourself look like clowns, is what you're doing. I wish we had clown music. We need to get clown music for next week.
We do,
I'll work on that.
Because it is unbelievable. So the full players counter offer to the MLB today looks something like this. So as mentioned, a 70-game season starting July 19th and ending September 30th, full prorated play, spring training to begin next week, the 26th of June. So they want to get there. They want to get this done. As mentioned, expanded playoff pool for both the next two seasons and a minimum pool for playoff shares based on rounds played. $50 million if full playoff is staged. So opt-outs and $10 million for justice initiatives. I mean, there's a full plan about this on broadcasting money, and the list goes on and on and on and on. John Heyman did a great job breaking this down on Twitter. If you want to see his full breakdown, at John Heyman. But look, at the end of the day, Kyle, this is what I look at. This is what I look at. When we bring up the Twitter poll, the DH needs to happen, and it's just stupid if it doesn't. Number two, we need to listen to the players at least a little bit. 70 games doesn't seem insane to me. 65, if we meet in the middle, will the players give it a thumbs up? I don't know.
Here's my take on that. You look at numbers like 65 and 70 and even proposed games before. We've seen a 50-game proposal. We've seen a 114-game proposal. Those numbers don't make any sense. Like, right. I get that we're looking at round, somewhat whole numbers. I guess they're all whole numbers, but round numbers. You think about how MLB is played. It's played in 3-game series, right? Most of the time. Sometimes you get a 4-game series. Sometimes you get a 2-game series. What makes the most sense to me is if we're going between the 60 and 70-game range, play either 63, 60, because 60 isn't going to get passed now that we know about. So I'm not even going to, because 60 technically is a multiple of 3. So I know we're doing a math segment now, but
this is awesome.
63, 66, or 69 games.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Round numbers, baby. Yeah, great multiplication.
I mean, they're multiples of 3. Think about how easy it would be just to format. Even if you look at 66 games as the closest to the middle I can get, that's 22 series.
Yep.
you're only playing teams. So if the Brewers are playing the Cubs, they're playing the Cardinals, the Pirates, and the Reds.
Yep.
And then they would play all 5 teams from the AL Central. So you're looking at the White Sox, the Tigers, the Indians, the Twins, and the Royals.
Yep.
You can make easy 3-game series with all those teams, and it just makes sense to do. I don't know why I know why they're proposing the round, 65, 70, 60, stuff like that, because they're round numbers. But
Right.
just make it easy on everybody.
I agree with you, man.
I'm making it easy with schedule-wise. I also want to bring up, going all the way back to the DH proposal. When the MLB hit their strike in '94,
Yep.
baseball's popularity was at an all-time low, kind of like what it is at now.
Yeah.
What was the thing that brought the popularity back? Summer of '98, steroid era.
Oh yeah, steroid.
Mark McGwire. Hold on. First of all, I'm not saying bring steroids back.
This sounds like what you're getting at, but I'm going to let you finish.
So I'm thinking, if the steroid era helped baseball come back in late '90s with Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, the universal DH could bring the popularity back. And it's a hot take, but the universal DH.
Steroids versus adding 15 teams, a constant DH.
But you think about it, brings the offense to life. It brings it to a more modern game.
Yeah.
The best things in life adapt to change. If the MLB wants to stay with the DH in the AL only, it's not going to help them out. I honestly think a universal DH, you get guys like Ryan Braun, you get guys like Eric Thames playing DH and just worried about hitting dingers. I think that the MLB's popularity could increase, kind of like we saw with the summer of '98.
See, the summer of '98 rise versus obviously.
But I thought that was a good comparison, and I thought I was going to be creative with it. So
you tried. It was solid. It was a good effort, but the ratings would not obviously be anywhere near.
Well, I'm trying to help out MLB a little bit. So
you are, but you're right. I mean, obviously, if we want kind of this revitalization of our fan base, you need to do something, because this game, as I've said a couple times throughout this segment, the game is dying. And especially with what we've seen in the last 2 months, with this just nonsensical BS back and forth that these two parties have been doing, you need something to get fans excited. Now, all these traditionalists with these unwritten rules and blah, blah, this and that are going to get pissed off because there's a DH in the NL. But like I said, there is a designated hitter at every level of baseball throughout the country, other than the 15 teams in the MLB that don't have a DH.
I believe even if you go as far back as middle school, I'm just trying to
middle
school crap up.
Softball has a DH.
The MLB National League is the only league the only organized league that I know of that doesn't have a DH.
Correct. You're absolutely spot on. Pitchers don't hit in this time. So who thinks it's smart to bring in a pitcher to the Milwaukee Brewers, right? Let's say the Brewers bring in a pitcher who probably hasn't swung the bat since high school, if I had to guess. Like, legitimately probably has not stood at the plate since they were 18 years old, and now they're 26 making their major league debut. How do you think that's going to go for them? Well, they're going to strike out every time.
It did go pretty well for Brandon Woodruff in the NLCS against Clayton Kershaw. Just saying.
Yes, and I'm saying in the rare occasions, obviously it provides an awesome moment for a guy like Brandon Woodruff.
As we end this segment, you know who was a really good Brewers batting pitcher? This guy right here, Yovani Gallardo.
Yeah, Yo was the man. He was the guy that got me interested in baseball. So that's a great jersey choice by you today. Andy Herman of PackerReport.com and the founder of Pack a Day Podcast joins me next. This is the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central.
He is the top 5 right tackle in the league. There's no question. If you would have told me the Packers could have signed a top 5 right tackle in the league, I'd been like, yes, please do it. But clearly Brian Gutekunst had other ideas, and we've seen guys leave the Packers and then kind of fade away maybe 1 or 2 years later. Perfect example, Clay Matthews got released by the Rams. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Demarius Randall, Deshaun Kaiser. There's been a few guys who've kind of just faded away after they left the Packers, and that tells me that Brian Gutekunst does have a good gauge as to where his roster's at. Yeah. So the argument for leaving Bulaga alone, letting him go to the Chargers, is because, so let's say the Packers have $30 million to spend and they did not spend it on Bulaga. They actually saved money sending Bulaga out to the Chargers, or not sending him, but letting him walk, and signing Christian Kirksey and Rick Wagner. Together, those two players, their contracts equals $24 million. So they save roughly about $60 million. And you know what? They even add, let's just throw Mercedes Lewis contract in there. It's $2.25 million. So you still got looking at about 3.5. So it's interesting to see kind of the way these numbers work. And Bulaga's contract alone would have covered all three of those players. So I think that's where Brian Gutekunst does the math.
The Lambeau Lead, Cream City Central's official Packers podcast. Download wherever you get your podcasts.
My first segment I am calling Just the Tip-Off, and that is my best Bob Uecker impression. Tell me what you think. I'll work on it, see if I can get that a little better. But this segment, Just the Tip-Off, the name, Just the Tip, I'm going to give you a few ideas that are just the tip of a good idea. They're not completely fully formed. Some things that are bouncing around in my head. And Tip-Off, of course, it is the first segment of this show. So last night, the Bucks were playing the Lakers. Obviously, LeBron James plays for the Lakers. One thing LeBron has put all over social media the last few months this season is his idea, and I believe he's tried to trademark it, is Taco Tuesday. He started that on social media, him and his family and Anthony Davis and some other players every Tuesday, or as many Tuesdays as possible, get together and have tacos. And he tried to trademark that, and he's trying to make some money off that. And I was thinking, what would Giannis's equivalent of Taco Tuesday be? Obviously, he had his run-in at Bel Air Cantina a few years ago, so probably doesn't want to go the taco route. Maybe he wants to play into his Greek heritage a little bit. So I had the idea for Souvlaki Saturdays. Just an idea, just the tip of an idea. Maybe that'll make its way to Giannis, and he'll run with it. Who knows? Small Ball, Milwaukee Bucks micro podcast, presented by Cream City Central. Download wherever you get your podcasts.
It's the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central.
We welcome you back into the Strouf Show, here presented by Cream City Central. Let's go to the guest line, because this is a conversation I've been looking forward to for a few weeks, ever since we got the confirmation. He is the owner of Pack-A-Day Podcast, the editor of PackerReport.com, and probably the most informed Wisconsinite on Jordan Love. So we might as well go right to him. It's Andy Herman. Andy, how are you, my friend?
Alex, I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to this. I was excited when you asked me to come on, and really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming, so we might as well waste no time. I'm going to start with Jordan Love, because we have to, right? You've probably spent the last 3 months, maybe not 3 months, but 300 hours total digging through tape, especially the 2018 season. I want to ask the difference. Obviously, 2019 wasn't as good to Jordan Love as 2018 was. What were some of the differences you saw between those 2 years?
Yeah, so I'm for, kind of giving you a background. I've watched all of the 28 stuff that I could possibly get my hands on. I actually have access to the all 22 for all of his 2019 stuff, which I'm now, I think, 4 or 5 games through, and I'm going to continue doing that so I can evaluate all of his 2019 stuff as well. But you're absolutely right. The 2018 stuff is phenomenal. It's fantastic. It's, to me, top 5, top 10 level, draft pick level status. It is, number 1 or 2 quarterback in a draft type stuff. It was so much fun to watch. You just see somebody who has improvisational ability, a live arm, easy gas on his throws. He can make legitimately every throw on the field from every single angle. He can drop arm angles if he needs to. He can hit deep, intermediate, short, left, middle, right, on the run, rolling left, rolling right. It does not matter. He has the ability and the straight up physical ability to make those throws. And this is not, I think a lot of people, get this idea of it's just another Deshaun Kaiser. It's just another project that, and these quarterbacks don't work out. And I am number 1A on the bandwagon of, these project quarterbacks. There's not the time. There's no more Mike McCarthy scouting school. The CBA doesn't allow it. There's no more, spending a ton of time, effort, and energy in developing these quarterbacks. If they're usually not ready to go day one, things don't really progress all that great. We kind of saw Ryan Tannehill resurgence a season ago. That's kind of the exception to the rule, and I'm really interested to see if that's the real Ryan Tannehill or if he kind of regresses back. The advanced analytics will say he's probably going to regress a little bit, but with Jordan Love, it's not that. You don't have to be this advanced scout to be like, you know what, he's this now, but I think he's going to be that. You see absolutely everything that you need to see. The one question mark is some of the decision-making and the ability to read defenses. And that was really the striking difference between 2018 and the stuff that I've done with 2019 so far. In 2018, there would be flashes of him not seeing a linebacker, of him staring down a receiver, of him trying to do too much and force a ball where, you shouldn't trying to be forcing the ball. In 2019, in those first 4 games, there's 3 of them. I posted last night a video. I think there was something like 16, turnover-worthy play, 12 turnover-worthy plays in 3 games. And it was a variety of everything. So that's what you have to figure out a way to coach out of him, is just some of that decision-making, making sure that he has vision to the throwing lanes that he's throwing into, making sure that he's reading defenses pre-snap and make sure that there's not a linebacker sitting in the zone that he wants to throw in. Those sort of things are what he's going to have to learn. And what better way to learn from, Aaron Rodgers, the most turnover-averse quarterback in the history of the NFL, the guy who will not take risks. If he can just pick up a modicum of that, if he can just pick up a little bit of that, that is going to enhance his value tremendously, because he has everything else that you would possibly want.
Andy Herman is my guest here on the Strouf Show. Great insight from him. So I want to ask you, I want to go back, 2 months. What was your initial reaction to both the trading up and the pick of Jordan Love? I'll be completely transparent with you. I was drunk and on a live stream, but I was thrilled.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think there was a variety of different topics coming off of that. The one, it being a quarterback, 2, it not being a wide receiver, and then no wide receiver the rest of the way. Then some of the power running type things with AJ Dillon and Josiah DeGuara. There's so many conversations. So let me start about 3 days, I think, before the draft. 3 days before the draft, I posted a tweet that said, I narrowed it down to, I think, 10 players that I thought they would select. And then I said, if I had to say there's one of 3 players that I believe the Packers will select, I said it's going to be Austin Jackson, Ezra Cleveland, or Jordan Love. Those were my 3, just because Green Bay focuses on premium position players with their first pick. It's just been the way for the last 20 plus years under Wolf, Thompson, and now Brian Gutekunst. They want those premium, position players. And when you kind of looked at what was expected to be available at that time, it kind of seemed like maybe one of the offensive tackles, again, maybe an Austin Jackson, Ezra Cleveland, quarterback. If it was a quarterback, it was going to be Jordan Love. And I kind of expected those wide receivers, even though not what they would consider a premium position, certainly a position that they needed a ton of. I kind of expected those top 4 to be gone. Well, not only were the top 4 gone, the top 6 were gone, and Rager and Ayuk as well. So I was not surprised by the selection. If anything, the one thing that I was slightly surprised by was trading up. And I think that Ted Thompson was able to use the idea both with Aaron Rodgers and with Brian Brom of saying, you know what, we just had this quarterback that we loved that fell to us, and we just took the best player available. And I think that's a defensible, argument to make in those situations. And obviously it came up aces with Aaron Rodgers. With Brian Gutekunst, this is not the same case. There's a different optics to this. They didn't just stay, at their pick and say, well, Jordan fell to us and he was the best player on our board. They made a move up to go up and get him, which again, I think has that different level of optics. But what I'll say by this is, if you like a quarterback that much and you aren't willing to give up a late 4th round pick, basically a 5th round pick, in order to move up and get him, you don't like that quarterback. Right. Like if you're not willing to give up that minimal of a selection in order to move up for a trade, you didn't like the quarterback that much, and he probably shouldn't have been your pick at 30 anyway. So it gives me some faith that they liked him that much that they were willing to move up and get him. And I think that was the only thing at the time that surprised me. But the more that I thought about it, it certainly made sense to make that decision.
And I agree 100%. Great insight. Andy Herman joining us here on the Alex Strouf Show. You brought up the lack of wide receivers. Obviously, not one picked in the NFL draft, which probably came as a surprise to you as well as it did me. But you wrote a nice piece about Alan Lazard. You said he won't follow in the footsteps of Geronimo Allison and Jarrett Boykin. Can you go ahead and explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of Packer fans have been kind of bit by that undrafted free agent story. There's always like two in training camp. You can go back really far, whether the Tory or the Tory Gurleys, the DeAndre Burrells, Alex DeGraff and Reed, if you want to go super far back. Like there's always this random wide receiver that everyone loves and gets on board with in training camp. And then there's a couple that actually make it past training camp and into the season and actually make some sort of impact. And that was certainly the case with, Geronimo Allison and Jarrett Boykin. And, you look at Boykin, the year that he had, the 1 year that he had a really nice year. I mean, that was a fairly impressive year. It was a number 2, maybe number 3 quality wide receiver year. And then after that, he completely fell off the face of the earth. He didn't really do anything for the Packers again, and was out of the NFL shortly thereafter. Geronimo Allison, somewhat similar. I thought in 2018, he really started to kind of break out. And then kind of had the injuries. And then in 2019, he just came back and wasn't the same. And, now he's with a division rival. So I think Packer fans have been kind of burnt by those undrafted free agent stories. And I think, some people just think, well, it's going to be the exact same thing with Alan Lazard. And I just don't see it that way. And I'm not saying he's going to be, a future number 1 receiver. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case, but I think he can be a solid number 2. I think he can progress on what he showed last year. I do not see him just falling off the face of the earth and all of a sudden, catching 20 balls this year. And then next year he's, playing for the Rams or something. Like, I don't see that career arc for him. I think he's going to continue to progress. I think he's a big time, possession receiver over the middle. I think he showed the ability, he flashed playmaking ability, not necessarily after the catch, but at the catch point, being able to go up and make contested catches. And he really converted some big third downs at the end of last season as well. So I think you're going to continue to see him in that role. And I don't think he's going to fall off the face of the earth.
Great stuff, as always, Andy. We talked with Zach Jacobson on Tuesday. Yeah, right. It was just horrible. About Rashawn Gary and maybe the emergence he could potentially make in 2020. Your thoughts on Rashawn Gary? Can he make a big jump? Obviously, one of the highest draft picks in recent memory for the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, he has every skill and trait that you would want at that position. I think so much gets made out of Rashawn Gary not seeing a ton of playing time last year, when you really have to remember, who are you taking off the field? I mean, Zadarius Smith, came up aces 1,010%. You never wanted to take him off the field. Preston Smith to a lesser degree, but still, everything that you would have wanted and more. And one of it, his abilities that doesn't get talked about enough is his ability to drop into coverage and play that, really, really well. And I think, the argument could be made, well, why didn't they just move him inside and do some things like that? Well, Rashawn Gary was already learning a new position as a stand-up outside linebacker. I don't think the best thing in that situation is to throw, 2, 3, 4 positions at him and say, hey, go try to do all of it. I think when he's trying to learn something new like that, I think you want to keep him as a stand-up outside linebacker. And in that situation, you're behind Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, and really the outside linebacker who was best the season before was Kyler Fackrell, and he continued to be a top backup for him last year. So I don't think his playing time was necessarily so much based upon the fact that they didn't have trust in him as it was the guys playing ahead of him were just better, and you didn't want to take those guys off the field. So he's going to be in a position this year to be that top backup between, behind both Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith. I think you're going to see Zadarius Smith continue to be moved around and moved inside. And Mike Pettin made mention that Rashawn Gary is going to, has that potential to move inside and kind of play a very similar role as Zadarius Smith as well. And I don't think you're going to want to see, Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith rack up as many snaps during the regular season as they did a season ago. I think they're going to want to keep those guys a little bit more fresh as the season progresses. So I think Gary's in line for a significant increase in snaps. I think if you go back to that Seattle game, they played him inside on a couple different plays, and he had a great pressure of Russell Wilson on a really key play where Wilson would have been able to make a really key completion to kind of keep Seattle's hopes alive. Gary had a great pressure. He didn't get the sack, but it really forced Wilson to look away from his intended receiver. I think you see those sort of flashes, and I think Green Bay is really hoping he can continue that progression as we move into this season.
Andy, do you have every play that's ever happened in Packers history melted into your brain?
I wish I had that sort of memory. I do not have that Aaron Rodgers-esque memory. I have to go back and watch things over so that I can remember some of this stuff, because I'm on to the next thing as soon as the last thing is done. Right. I'm a history major, so you'd think I'd focus on the past a little bit more, but I don't at all. So I'm always in the present.
Your memory is a lot better than mine. I have to give you credit. Andy Herman is my guest at Andy Herman NFL on Twitter. A couple more for you, Andy. You just wrote an article this past weekend called "Recent History Suggests 2020 Could Be Difficult for Green Bay." It's all about a double-digit playoff loss, and typically that hasn't bid well for teams the following season. So dive into that article a little bit for those that haven't read it. It was a very interesting read and well done by you.
Yeah, and so first of all, I don't think anything that happened in the past, and again, I'm speaking as a history major here, but I don't think anything that necessarily happened in the past is going to affect what Green Bay does this season, especially with what's going on. Everything's a degree of difference. I don't know how much you can trust previous statistics, but that being said, I just wanted to take a look at it. What do teams do after they were blown out in a double-digit loss in the playoffs? And I wanted to just kind of take a look at that. Is it something where no teams make the playoffs? Is it, they're completely fine? And over the course of the last 4 years, I think it was, and this is where my bad memory comes in, I think it was 4 out of 19, if I remember correctly, 4 out of 19 teams made the playoffs, in the last 4 years after a double-digit playoff loss. So, 1 out of 5 is obviously not great. 3 of those 4 were bounced by the divisional round in the playoffs, and only 1 of the 19 teams made it past the divisional round. That was the Rams team that lost in the Super Bowl. So, recent history isn't great. There were a little bit further back, there was a Patriots team who lost by double digits in the conference championship game and won the Super Bowl the next year. I believe it was the Broncos as well against the Panthers, came off a double-digit playoff loss the season before and also won a Super Bowl. So it's not like it's this completely unheard of thing. But recent history, last 4 years, would say that Green Bay's challenge going into this next season could maybe be a little bit more than what we're thinking.
Andy, last one for you, and it's off the realm of the Packers, more of stuff you've got going on. Pack-A-Day podcast is well over a year now. It's an amazing project. For those unfamiliar, can you explain what that is and how that came to life?
Yeah, so Pack-A-Day podcast is a 365-day-a-year dedicated Packers podcast. It'll be 2 years in July, actually. So we're coming up on 2 years, which is crazy. We've never missed a day. We've never missed an episode. And I cannot talk enough about the people that we have on the team. My whole, goal is to surround myself with people smarter than me so that I look good. And that has been very successful with the Pack-A-Day podcast. That team is full of tremendous people. And I can't recommend enough going out and checking the episodes. Last week, we had on Sarah Spain, which is ridiculous. Dusty, Steve, and Sarah had on Sarah, and she was absolutely amazing. And then Billy Turner was on last week with myself. It's just a tremendous, and Jimmy Christensen, I should say as well. So it's a tremendous episode that I can't recommend enough as well. So the idea behind it, just really quick, I listen to The New York Times, The Daily podcast. They do a once a day episode, 5 days a week. And that was, I'm like, you know what? I think that there is a thirst for Packers content in a similar vein. So let me put something together. I thought maybe we would do 1 a day, 5 days a week, something like that. And I just got so many responses by people who wanted to do it and be a part of it that I said, screw it. Let's do 365 days a year. Let's have fun with it. And it's been phenomenal ever since.
One of the best podcasts out there, and exactly what you do with that podcast is what I've done for the last 17 minutes by surrounding myself with somebody a lot smarter than me. Andy, thank you so much for taking the time, man. We'll do it again.
Anytime. Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course, man. Andy Herman, that's Andy Herman, the editor of PackerReport.com, the founder and owner of the Pack-A-Day podcast, at Andy Herman NFL on Twitter. You just heard him say things you'd never hear me say because he's a lot smarter.
I gotta come on, because holy crap, did I just like...
Did your brain just melt with all that information?
Oh my gosh, that was fantastic.
Always good stuff from Andy Herman. I mean, that guy is truthfully a genius. And something we didn't even mention, Andy is an NFL scout school graduate. Thus why he gets really into the all 22 film breakdowns. And he's just terrific. So we'll have him on again in the near future as we get closer and closer, fingers crossed, to training camp and eventually the regular season. But I wanna move on before we have to catch a break and get to hour 2. I want to go into a quote that I saw today by John DeFilippo, who is the brand new quarterbacks coach, of the rival Chicago Bears. And DeFilippo has been in the NFL since 2005. He was the offensive coordinator for the Browns back in 2015. That obviously went superb. He was the offensive coordinator for the Vikings in 2018. The offensive coordinator of the Jags last year, eventually fired from that gig and now brought into Chicago as the quarterbacks coach. Now, yesterday, John DeFilippo met with Chicago media, and he said the following. I couldn't get the audio, but I will just read it to you. He said, "Playing with juice, passion, energy, and swagger, baby. That's what we're defined as in our room. We have a passion for the game. We have a ton of energy. We're the same people every day. And then we walk around with a little bit of swagger to ourselves in terms of we know that we're the best quarterback room in the National Football League.
What did you say? What did you say? What did you say? What did you say?
What did you say? We're the best quarterback room in the National Football League? One more time.
What did you say? What did you say? What did you say? What did you say?
I get it. Nick Foles is probably a top 5 backup in the National Football League, maybe even top 3, right? Nick Foles is a thumbs-up backup quarterback, but your starting quarterback in the National Football League is Mitchell Trubisky, who had an atrocious 2019 campaign, a decent 2018 campaign, but really never deserved to be picked number 2 overall. I mean, and he hasn't really proven that he is like a star by any means in this league. He's like a very average, at best, competent quarterback. So they bring in Nick Foles, who obviously a former Super Bowl MVP, a few years back with Philadelphia. But John DeFilippo says, then we walk around with a little bit of swagger to ourselves in terms of we know that we're the best quarterback room in the National Football League. That's a laughable comment. How in the world do you actually believe that when you're not even the best quarterback room in the NFC North? Like, I'd absolutely put Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love above Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. Sorry, but I'd do that. I look at New Orleans, Drew Brees and Jameis Winston. I'll take that every day of the week over Trubisky and Foles. Like, come on. Like, I get being swagger and trying to drive your guys, but I don't even think Mitch Trubisky believes that is the best quarterback room in the National Football League. I sure as hell don't. You sure as hell don't. The only person that might actually believe that is Nick Foles, knowing that he is a top 3, maybe top 2, maybe the top backup as of now in the National Football League. I'd be shocked if Nick Foles isn't starting by week 4 or week 6. Mid-season, I'd be shocked if Foles isn't the starter for the Chicago Bears. But that brings me to my next little point, and that is a list that I put out this week. So a few weeks back, we did the Fight Night debate, which we'll get to here in about 40 minutes for this week. But 2 weeks ago, we did the top 5 quarterbacks entering the 2020 season. Now, I went ahead after I ranked my top 5. I got enough scrutiny and complaints and being told I'm an absolute dumbass on Twitter. I went ahead and ranked my top 20 quarterbacks for 2020. Now, my top 5, I'll run down that right away because if you didn't see the show a few weeks back, I'll run down my top 5. I have Dak Prescott at 5, Drew Brees at 4, Russell Wilson at 3, Lamar Jackson at 2, and obviously Patrick Mahomes at 1. So Dak Prescott is where everybody freaks out and says, whoa, that's not going to happen. It's absolutely possible. So my full list of the top 20 quarterbacks entering 2020, or for the 2020 season, rather, not entering 2020, for the 2020 season. It's how I think it's going to play out quarterback rankings-wise, whether that be statistics, whether that be win counts, whatever have you, kind of all brought into play. I have those 5 quarterbacks leading the charge. But that said, going back to John DeFilippo's quote, I ranked 25. I put 5 that just missed the cut, and I put the top 20. And you know who I didn't have in that top 25? I didn't have Mitch Trubisky, and I didn't have Nick Foles. No, I did not. Because Mitch Trubisky, if he is the starter, is a bottom 5 starter, probably along with some rookies, right? We don't know what Joe Burrow is going to do. We don't know when Tua Tagovailoa is going to see the field. We don't know even if Justin Herbert's going to see the field in season 1. So this top 20 list that I put out is just a testament. And I know my word isn't sacred by any means. You probably have a better idea than I do. But Mitch Trubisky not being on there, Nick Foles not being on there, that right there should absolutely fill in the blank that this isn't the best quarterback room in the National Football League. It's just not. I mean, again, we walk around with a little bit of swagger to ourselves, knowing we're the best quarterback room in the National Football League.
What did you say? What did you say? What did you say? What did you say?
Just idiotic on the end of John DeFilippo. It's baffling to me that you would say that. I mean, Mitch Trubisky literally led that fall from grace for Chicago last year, where they went from, a double doink away from the NFC Championship game to a bottom feeder in the NFC. Mitch Trubisky played the biggest role in that. And of course, we have to place some blame on Matt Nagy and company. But really, Mitch Trubisky proved he's probably not a franchise quarterback last year. He proved that he is not a franchise quarterback next year. And does he get the opportunity this year where they say, okay, go out there and prove your worth, Mitch? Then yeah, maybe he has a little bit of a comeback year from, like I said, the bottom feeder that they were at last year. But at the end of the day, just dumb on the end of John DeFilippo, the quarterback coach of the Bears. The brand new men's head basketball coach at UW Green Bay, Will Ryan, joins me next. This is the Alex Strouf Show.
Would like to hear other players' views on this, just because obviously we've really only heard Blake Snell's, strong opinion on this, which I respect him because.
Oh, you haven't heard the Trevor Bauer.
Oh, maybe what has Trevor Bauer said?
So him and his agent Rachel Luba, they've been putting out all these videos with the postponement and kind of how it is from an agency perspective and a player perspective. They've been really just kind of putting everything out there that everybody's afraid to say. And I've been watching a ton of the videos with it. And they put out a whole hour video about the suspected proposal and what the rumors are. And one of the things that made me laugh so hard, and he talked about it, and he's pretty much on the same page as Blake Snell from the aspect of we already agreed to something, and the MLB is basically stepping back and saying, maybe not, maybe we can't do that, which is, I think, what's getting the players the most. However,
shouldn't they expect that? I guess, everybody's life is different right now, so why shouldn't theirs be different?
But the thing that has bothered them the most, so the MLB already said, okay, deal that they had put in place at the beginning of the postponement of the season. They said, okay, we will take prorated salary, so we're already diminishing a chunk of our guaranteed salary depending on how many games we play. And then they agreed on the service time and everything. And now the MLB has essentially said, maybe not, maybe you won't even get that much. And that's the thing that's frustrating, is because they already agreed and that's something that I never thought they would agree with in the beginning, because it's a money game. Everybody wants the most amount of money they can. And so that's where the players are like, well, what the hell are you doing now? Now you're saying I may not even get half of my salary.
Bernie's Bums, the official Brewers podcast of CreamCityCentral.com. Download wherever you get your podcasts today. And we roll right into hour two, right here on the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central, and we will waste no time. We're going to go straight to the phone line as the brand new men's basketball coach at UW Green Bay, Mr. Will Ryan, joins me. Coach, thanks so much for taking the time, man. I know it's been a busy few weeks for you.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. I appreciate your time.
Of course, man. Of course. Anytime. So let's jump right into it. We're about a week and a half removed from the official hiring of you, Coach. What's this last, 10, 12, 14 days been like for you?
It's been an absolute whirlwind.
Yeah.
Everything happened so fast. I've never done speed dating before, but somebody used that term, that it's like speed dating, because back to back to back to back, you can go on and on about the number of interviews, and it was like a 3-day process where you had to knock out interview after interview. So it was intense, but I'm really glad to be back in the state of Wisconsin.
And we're glad to have you back. Obviously, everybody knows what your dad did. I'm not going to do any dad questions. I'll stay away from those today. We want we want to know about you. So you had your official press conference last week, Thursday, actually just about a week ago as of right now. So how'd that go? What was it like, obviously, being in the presence of everybody you're going to work with in the future and seeing a lot of the media that will be covering you? What was the introductory press conference like for you?
You're not married, are you?
I'm not, no.
You're not. Okay. Well, I liken it to my wedding day.
Okay.
So you can't relate, I guess. But talking to Charles Guthrie, our AD, like we were comparing notes on what it felt like, and he mentioned wedding. I go, that's exactly the way I thought, but I didn't want to say that because I didn't know if anybody else felt the same way. But no, it's just so much. Like nervous energy, you're anxious to get going and get through the whole process because I didn't have a press conference when I got the job at Wheeling University in West Virginia. So this is the first time I got to go through that. But no, it went by smoother than I thought it would. And, I enjoyed it. It was great getting to see people, although most people were hiding behind a mask. Because of COVID. Right. So, it's just a different animal trying to deal, with all that stuff. But no, it's getting to meet everybody, see people face to face, because being hired over the phone essentially, and a couple Zoom calls here, it's just uncharted territory.
Yeah, I imagine it's unlike anything you've been through. And you brought up Wheeling, so I'm going to go there. You were hired there July 1st of last year, if I'm not mistaken, and you inherited only 5 players. Is that correct?
That is correct. So 5 guys were returning from the previous coach.
Wow. So that was obviously a little bit different than this, but and I know you were asked this question last week and your response was you got all day. What was that like, kind of overall, that Wheeling experience going in, only having 5 guys when you got the job very late, as I mentioned, July 1st. What was that whole experience like at Wheeling? What did that teach you leading to this job?
Well, it was nerve-wracking in the sense that the school, in the spring had gone through what's called financial exigency. You'll have to look that up because I can't explain it all that well. But it used to be Wheeling Jesuit University, and the Jesuit community moved out. They condensed and cut a lot of classes and majors. And, with that, you lost a lot of students and you lost a lot of student athletes. And the previous coach who was there for 1 year, he decided he had some family stuff going on back in Indiana. He decided to leave as well. So 5 guys that he had recruited decided to stay. And, of those 5, 2 of them were started or played heavy minutes from the year before. So a lot of inexperience there. And, get the job July 1st, you have about 6 weeks to recruit. I was able to bring in 14 new players.
Wow.
And of those 14, there's about 4 or 5 that got into the rotation. 2 of them being, junior college kids that I found late, and they really gave us a boost. And so, you're predicted last in the conference. And, I knew we'd be down towards the bottom. I guess I didn't think we'd get, be predicted last, but you meet with the team and you say, hey, they picked us last. You and I both know that's not going to happen. This is the last time we talk about it. So we ended up getting 5th place.
Yeah.
And, we were limited in certain areas. We weren't very big. We had a 7-foot kid, but then after him, we were small.
Right.
So we scrapped, we fought, we clawed like crazy. And, loved coaching those kids. I'll always remember them as my first team, and, they fought hard.
Will Ryan, the new head men's basketball coach at UW Green Bay, is my guest now. Will, obviously, you coached under Saul Phillips for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, about 12 years between North Dakota State and Ohio. You got some sense of humor from him, is what I hear. Is that correct?
Oh, I cannot top him when it comes to the jokes. I mean, he's full of them, and he's very witty. He can come up with stuff, and you just shake your head at him, and all you can do is laugh.
Love it. So let's talk about the reception in Green Bay. Like I mentioned, it's been about a week and a half. What have the Phoenix fans, probably virtually more so, what has the reception been like?
So far, it's been nothing but positive. I mean, I haven't lost the game yet, so everything's great right now. So, I mean, it's crazy because, I've recruited this area and at the various stops I've been at. So a lot of the people that, that I know, there's so many different connections with, some of these boosters and stakeholders. So you mentioned one name and they're like, oh, I know him. And then your talks get a little more in depth, and it's just crazy how small of a world it is.
Right.
And I think that's really going to help, our program, bringing everybody back and then get them invested again in Green Bay basketball.
Right, and you mentioned it. I mean, we know it's a fact. Attendance has been declining at the Resch Center, and obviously a new coach is going to bring some life. I want to ask one more question about the interview process. It came to light that Mark Murphy, the president of the Packers, was a part of that. What was that like, speaking with him in the last round of interviews?
To be totally honest with you, I was kind of shocked that I was going to be on the call with him. And, leading up to it, I think it was like 4:30 in the afternoon was my call with him. And I'm just thinking, all right, he's going to be, hey, good luck to you. Hope you get the job. Go Pack, go. And then that was going to be it.
Yeah.
Well, he was so down to earth, and just it couldn't have been a nicer gentleman. And I could have talked to him for hours. Just really personable, really, really likable. And then he was at the press conference too, so I got to talk to him some more. But no, it was a great vibe on the phone, and I was really impressed.
So I am going to ask a dad question, but it's about him being a dad, not the former coach, as well as your mom, your wife, and your three sons. When you knew that this job was yours, what were those conversations like with all of them?
With my family?
Yes.
My wife and kids?
Yeah.
It was, my wife is like me. Like, we could not sleep, during the interview process, and just, waking up at 5 and it's like, all right, time to get going today. And, I'm on the phone all day long with people and pacing around the house, got my steps up like big time on my watch. But, no, we didn't say anything to my sons at first, but when it was, starting to come into fruition, you're like, okay, we got to let them know that, hey, I'm interviewing and this really could happen.
Yeah.
And they were all just ecstatic.
Good.
They were, there's a little bit of mixed emotions. Like, they got to leave some brand new friends, and, but only being there for a year, we weren't quite entrenched in Wheeling quite yet. So, we're still going to go back there. We got to get our house in order. They'll get to say goodbye to their friends. But, my boys they've been great through all this.
Awesome.
They're at an age now, I think they understand it. And my wife, she's been amazing. She's a champion. She's a saint. So
Good to hear all that. Let's get into the basketball stuff, my friend. Will Ryan, the head coach of men's basketball at Green Bay, is my guest. A lot of your guys are coming back. You're not going to have the Wheeling issue in Green Bay. Have you talked? I'm assuming you've talked to your team, and what have those conversations been like with some of those guys?
The conversations so far have been nothing but positive. That's kind of your worst fear as a coach when you're taking over a new gig. You got to worry about roster retention, and you don't want a mass exodus because sometimes kids don't give you a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, I've seen it that way. Well, I've had a couple Zoom calls. I've talked with some of the upper class. Well, I've pretty much talked to everybody by now, or at least texted. But the guys have been nothing but great. They're excited. They're ready to go. And, they can't wait till we can finally get back in the gym if and when that ever happens. Right. But no, it's been nothing but positive.
And to talk about, offensive schemes, obviously a lot of these guys that are returning are used to the up-tempo ball that Link Darner coach. So how is kind of transitioning from his style to yours going to work? Do you think that's going to be a struggle, or is it something you guys are going to work in and be able to iron out pretty quickly?
I think as long as these guys bring the right frame of mind and they're good listeners and quick learners, I don't think we'll have a problem at all. I told them, I said, hey, we can score in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I don't care. Just as long as we're taking care of the ball, we're taking high percentage shots, multiple pass possessions, no zero pass possessions, one pass possession. It's a team game, and we all need to be on the same page. And if we share the ball, we're all going to get our shots. So, sometimes shots not falling. Okay, well, they've shown that they're really good at attacking the rim. Well, let's get to the free throw line. The outside shot's not falling, and you got to play to your personnel. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some really good pieces there. And I want to expand their games, and I really think that some of these kids can really blossom in our system.
Last one for you, Coach. Obviously, I mentioned the declining attendance. Obviously, this brings some excitement to Green Bay. What is your message to Phoenix Nation as we assume we head towards the start of the season here in a few months?
I just ask that they be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day, but there was work being done every day, is what I say. And right. I think once they. Once these kids get together, we're playing for a few months, they're just going to see the development and growth. And, I think once they see that and they stay patient with us, it's really going to take off. And I think they're going to like the product we put on the court.
Love it. That's Coach Will Ryan, the new men's basketball coach at UW Green Bay. Coach, thanks so much for taking the time. Safe travels to you, and look forward to seeing you on the court.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course, anytime. Line's always open. That's Coach Will Ryan at UW Green Bay joining us on the Alex Strouf Show. Really excited for him to get started. I mean, that was where I got my start, as we've mentioned a couple times throughout here. The first credential I was ever given was UW Green Bay men's basketball. So to see him come in here, and obviously the guy's fired up, great energy, great youth, and he knows his stuff. So really excited to see what comes from him. We've got 4 o'clock headlines on the other side. We're going to take a timeout. This is the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central.
I'm going to read you a quote from one of Giannis's teammates, and then, using your wealth of superstar NBA experience, you are going to read between the lines and tell us if we can actually learn anything from what this teammate has said. So first up, this is from Pat Connaughton on March 31st, so just a few weeks ago. He says, obviously the city of Milwaukee, the team, everyone wants Giannis to be here forever. But Giannis has put himself in a position to provide for his family from growing up with nothing in Greece. I don't think you can fault Giannis for whatever decision he ends up making, that he believes is the best decision for him, his family, the people who are closest to him.
Yo, Pat's a smart dude. Pat's trying to get on teams with Giannis in the future wherever Giannis ends up. Pat is not trying to ruffle feathers. Pat is giving a massage right there. That's my gut.
And can you blame him?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, he's a 6'5" white dude who relies on his athleticism. Yeah, I mean, how much of a career does he have left?
There's a ceiling. There's a ceiling. Yeah, man. Of course.
All right, Pat's playing the long game. Small Ball, Milwaukee Bucks Micro Podcast, presented by Cream City Central. Download wherever you get your podcasts.
Loud, unfiltered, and live nationwide. It's the Alex Strouf Show, presented by Cream City Central.
This is where things get a little tricky. I think the team that voted no today is going to be a playoff team.
From the WWSP 90 FM studios in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, here's Alex Strouf.
Well, into hour two, about 15 minutes past the hour. Big thanks to Coach Will Ryan. That was awesome stuff from him. Really excited he was able to jump on. I mean, just a week and a half removed from him officially being named the head coach of UW Green Bay men's basketball. So really good stuff from Coach Ryan there. But let's dive right into the 4 p.m. headlines. Producer Kyle is with us. Kyle, what you got, my friend?
These are the 4:15 headlines.
Yes, just about. Yeah, a little bit past.
So 4:15. Before I get into them, those two interviews we had back to back were just fantastic. Andy Herman dropping fantastic Packers knowledge on us. I mean, every time I listen to him talk, he's on the Fan here in Green Bay very often. Every time I hear him speak, I learn something new. So
exactly.
There you go. And Will Ryan, very grateful for him to come on. We've been following that entire story since episode 1 when we reported Link Darner got fired. We've been reporting it, and to see it kind of come full circle now was great. So I'm very thankful that he came on. The first headline of the day, the D1 Council, which is kind of like the governing body of, I guess you could say, of Division I football, approves the NCAA football preseason model. So what does that exactly mean? I'm going to read off my handy-dandy note sheet here.
Here we go.
Student athletes may be required to participate in up to 8 hours of weight training, conditioning, and film review per week. And no more than 2 hours of that can be film review. From July 13th to 23rd. So the NCAA football preseason model will start July 13th, so just a little under a month from now. So from July 13th to the 23rd, they're allowed 8 hours of weight training, conditioning, and film review per week. From July 24th through August 6th, student athletes may be required to participate in up to 20 hours of the same kind of activities.
Per week.
Okay. No more than 4 hours a day with that.
Okay.
And along with that, 2 of those days must be complete off days per week.
Okay.
So there you go. Kind of like a normal work week, just with less hours.
Right, exactly. Yeah, nothing too crazy. I mean, that looks pretty normal.
And this is also assuming that your team's first game is September 5th. So I don't know what that means. I know the Badgers, their first game is actually September 4th, scheduled against Indiana. Yeah. So I don't know if that means those days just could push back a day, or if now the Badgers game will now be played on September 5th, which is a Saturday.
We will see.
So just for your information there. Continuing with college football, as we talk about, teams coming back, 13 University of Texas players test positive for COVID-19.
Ooh.
So University of Texas has had voluntary workouts for the last couple days, and already they have 13 players testing positive. So this is not something that a college football fan wants to hear right from the get-go. However, it is worth noting that Texas is one of the kind of hot spots in the U.S. that is kind of growing right now. So you're looking at Texas, Florida, and I think California is the other one. I might be wrong on that. Maybe Arizona.
Arizona's up there,
yeah.
So this talk for baseball.
So I mean, it is a hot spot for the virus as of right now. So
interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously not a good sign for fans. I mean, we assume, at least you have to at this point, and this is college football. This is NFL football. The stadium attendance, they're going to let some fans in, obviously, but it's going to be low. And this
I don't
is
even know
obviously
if they're going to allow any in, if I'm being completely honest with you.
I just don't know how you go about doing that. I just don't know how you
how you don't have fans,
right? Especially at the NFL level, college level. I think that's a little bit different, and maybe a fair point. But the student.
I guess it is pretty easy to spread out. I mean, if you're looking at just Camp Randall, Camp Randall's a huge stadium. I've been there. I mean, I think it fits like close to 80,000 fans.
Yeah, it does.
You could probably fit pretty spaced out like 10 to 15,000 fans.
Right.
Pretty spaced out in Camp Randall, for an example.
Exactly. So. And I mean, however you make it look, but obviously this is bound to happen for teams, right? And this is what we're going to see this happen once the NBA returns, I assume. No matter how many precautions you take, there's still probably going to be some prevalence of COVID-19 that pops up. So, as S-wordy as it is, my friend, it's just realistic in the world we live in right now, and hope everybody heals up and there's no complications past obviously just the positive tests.
I do want to mention too, So those 13 players are in self-quarantine. Not self-quarantine, they're forced quarantine, those players. I also want to know 10 other student athletes at the University of Texas are in a self-quarantine. So I don't know if they have had contact with these players. I would assume they're probably just 10 more football players is my guess.
Yeah, I would probably guess that too.
Yeah. And the report I did see that all 23 who are in quarantine aren't showing any symptoms. So you can kind of take that as a good thing, whereas they're not showing any symptoms, but it's a bad thing as in, you don't know, they're asymptomatic, so you don't necessarily know if they're sick or not.
Right.
So moving on from that, kind of continuing with the coronavirus theme here and football, Dr. Fauci, who many of you have, heard his opinions on, throughout this entire process, had a quote from Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN, I believe it was this morning, saying that he does not think football is going to happen unless, this is the exact quote here, football will not happen, college and pro football, unless players are essentially in a bubble, like we are going to see with the NBA, isolated from the community, and they're tested nearly every day. It would be very hard to see how football is able to be played this fall. Now, I understand that Dr. Fauci is the leading, expert in this kind of situation right now. I don't see how the NFL doesn't play. No matter how bad the virus, I think if it gets super extreme, like what we.
Right. If we have an even, bigger uptick, then maybe. But no, there's no way the National Football League is going to not play. I don't know what it'll look like. It might not look like normal, but they're going to have a season. I can almost guarantee you that. Especially once the NBA starts rolling through, we're going to have a lot more answers than questions in regards to that. Unlike we do right now, obviously that's flip-flop.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions, not a lot of answers.
The NFL is such a huge entity in America, in American culture, that I don't think that it's feasible unless, if it's very extreme, if we see a very extreme uptick, and I'm not going to predict anything because I'm not anywhere near an expert on anything really. But I just don't see how you don't have an NFL season.
I don't know. I don't agree with this. As much as he knows that I don't, right? I don't have a medical degree by any means, but given the way the NFL has taken this COVID-19 scenario, right? Obviously the season was already over, but we talk about this almost every time we talk, Kyle. There was free agency, NFL draft, and now they've got plans in place for training camp. There's really been no buffer from the National Football League. They want to go on as planned.
It couldn't have worked, I hate to use this term, but any better for the NFL, because they're still suffering. They couldn't have the draft in person. They can't have mini camps. They're not going to have anything in person until end of July. And the NFL is going to still be losing money. There's talks about how there's a chance that the NFL salary cap is going to get frozen because of this, because I don't think the salary cap is going to go up, because
there's no way.
Yeah. So there's talks about freezing it so it doesn't drastically go down.
Yeah, it's gonna look weird, man. It's gonna look weird. The NFL season will not look entirely normal, but it will look different than it typically does. And obviously, we don't know what it's going to look like. But I don't think there's not going to be football. I think that's just not even a possibility in the realm of possibilities for the National Football League and Roger and company. There's no way they sit down and say we're not having football.
Yeah, and then John Wolf says here, every third seat require masks when leaving your seat. The thing with that, obviously we're talking about a restricted audience already. You talk about Lambeau Field, for an example. It's sold out every single game. How are you going to get season ticket holders to give up their game? Say for example, if you do half capacity, Lambeau Field, you're looking at 40,000 fans. How are you going to convince 40,000 season ticket holders? Obviously, they'd have to have some kind of, every other game kind of deal to it or something. They'd have to have some kind of plan. But it's not going to be fun logistically to deal with.
No, it's not.
So I always like to end my headlines with something a little lighthearted.
Oh, yeah, you do. Finally come around to that, don't you?
Alex, I know you're a fan of this show. I've kind of watched it on and off. I don't have HBO, so I don't watch it when it comes out, but I have watched past seasons of this. But today, the LA Chargers and Rams have been announced for season 11 of Hard Knocks. So, for those of you who watch Hard Knocks, I think it's one of the most intriguing, things the NFL puts out every year as far as media is concerned, because it is so cool seeing the behind the scenes, what goes on, especially with training camp too. For a nerd like myself, like seeing, interacting with, some of the lower level guys.
It's interesting that they're doing two teams. I like this. And obviously you add in the factor of Colin Kaepernick, which he's been rumored to ties with Anthony Lynn and the LA Chargers. We'll see if that happens. Obviously they drafted Justin Herbert early in the first round this year. They have Tyrod Taylor currently as their starter, but there's rumors that Kaepernick might get a shot with the Chargers. And that would be great to see right in film. Obviously he's been out of the league for several years. So
I'm not even on top of the fact that some people argue whether or not he's a great player or not. That's when I'm not going to debate that. Just the fact that it's going to be good TV.
Yeah.
Like that, if the Chargers were to go out and sign Kaepernick, I wouldn't be opposed to getting HBO just to watch it, because I think it would be so intriguing to see what's going on.
Yeah, of course, in that locker room. And obviously there's been a lot of conversations now, but obviously once we're all back together, there will be more. Yeah. And I look at the Rams too. I mean, they had quite the fall from grace a year ago. They were in the Super Bowl, then they didn't even make the playoffs. They took third place in their division. I think the Rams are a very intriguing team, and we'll get more into the NFC West here in a couple of minutes when we do Fight Night. But at the end of the day, man, I look at these two teams, obviously being located in the same city, it makes sense to do two teams. But both of them, very intriguing. New quarterback in town for the Chargers already, and potentially a second if they do end up signing or giving Colin Kaepernick a shot. And then you look at the Rams, who are trying to get back to that stud, mentality and that stud level they were at just 2 years ago. They were in the Super Bowl, and now they're not even that good. So it'll be fun to see kind of the back end side of things. With the handsomest coach in the league, with Sean McVay.
You mean Matt LaFleur, right?
Yes, he is right up there. Matt LaFleur is a beautiful man. But at the end of the day, no, I mean, it'll be really, really fun to see those two teams get after it. But, yeah.
That's all I got. Those are all the headlines.
Lovely. Thank you, my friend. Let's take one look at our Twitter poll before the end of the show at Cream City Central. If you haven't voted already, this has been a big hot button topic the last at least 2 days or so, given the back and forth between Major League Baseball and the MLBPA, the Players Association. So our Twitter poll today is, do you support a designated hitter in both the American and National League? Obviously, previously there has not been a DH in the National League, but now there's talks that this could be a thing as soon as when this weird season gets started, if it does. So we say, are you in favor of that? 69% of you say yes, while 22% of you say no, and 9% of you say you don't care. But the 69% of you, I'm with you. 22% of you, I just don't understand why taking away the designated hitter, or rather adding the designated hitter slot to the National League, really makes you upset. Like I said at the beginning of the show, this isn't a thing about whether or not we're baseball traditionalists, right? You look at anywhere else that baseball's played, and there's a designated hitter. There was 15 teams maybe in the United States that don't have a designated hitter regularly, and those are your 15 teams in the National League. It's stupid to me that this is set as a sad day in baseball. A designated hitter should be a no-brainer, and it should be done. Our Twitter poll is available until the end of the show. We'll take a last look at that in about 20 minutes, but we are going to...
I got one thing to say.
In. Yes.
Just came in from John Heymanis, who we mentioned earlier in the show.
Yeah.
Rob Manfred has gone out, quote now, we are committed to doing whatever is necessary to play, hopefully by agreement. Amplifying that, word from owners seem to be that the second choice, if they can't reach agreement, would be to let commissioner to implement the slightly shorter season and not call it off.
Okay.
So, I mean, it sounds like, if they don't...
It sounds like this is progress?
So it sounds like a little bit of progress, yes. So what I'm getting from this is what Manfred is saying. They're committed to playing by any means necessary. That's what the quote exactly says from John Heyman. So, and the owners seem to agree with that. I know we had a report earlier the last show saying that 6 to 8 owners potentially were against even just playing and just stopping the season and not playing at all.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the owners are saying that they want to find an agreement with the Players Association, but they are willing to implement the commissioner's mandated slightly shorter season, which would be, I think, about 50 games.
You know what that means, right? We're not getting a freaking deal. The players want to play more than 50 games, and I just don't see them moving. And maybe they will, because the then and there thing that they've been saying all week has kind of gone away with this MLBPA pitch that we had earlier today. But it's all weird to me. We'll get into it more after Fight Night. Let's take our break, and we will come back. Michael Bolick joins me next to discuss the best division in the NFC. This is the Alex Strouf Show.
Talking MLB proposal for the 2020 season.
Dude, I am so fired up about this. Like, I have gone on so many rants to the people around me who couldn't care less about it, but this whole thing has just got me in a tizzy.
So for the people that don't know, maybe me, how about you give us some of the details about what they proposed?
Okay. So I'll lay down kind of, this is what we know or is rumored to be on the proposal. Obviously, stuff hasn't officially been said, but the 4 main things that I've heard at least are to be an 82-game season, the playoffs would be expanded, there'd be the universal DH, and then the 50-50 revenue split. And so I guess we can kind of go down the lines. 82 games, it makes sense. So if we start on July 4th, it will just, and the other thing that I forgot to write down is it'll most likely be like region play. So you'll be playing only your division and then maybe interleague games with the division in your region. So like the AL Central would play the Brewers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's tough because it definitely makes you feel like the season would have an asterisk next to it.
I think it would inevitably. I mean, it is a shortened season. Any shortened season is going to have an asterisk next to it, and much less the circumstances around it. Like, this season will be talked about for years if it does go through, which, to be honest, I don't know if it will. But
Bernie's Bums, the official Brewers podcast of CreamCityCentral.com. Download wherever you get your podcasts today.
You look at teams like the 49ers, and they literally did a 180 in terms of performance and their ability to just beat the crap out of teams. And then you go, okay, well, why shouldn't I expect that from my team? And I didn't expect that from the Packers this year. I really didn't. Now, of course, we all have high expectations for next season.
I think there's always been a sense of high expectation as a fan. I mean, even last year when, we came off of the 7-9 season when Rodgers was out half the year, the feeling was, Rodgers is back. We should do better. That clearly just wasn't the case. There's always going to be a high level of expectation when you're the Green Bay Packers, just because of the history. There's a winning culture in this area. And LaFleur knew that too coming into his job. He knew that he had to, be successful right away. Not necessarily saying he had a short leash, but knowing that if he's not successful, he won't make it out of his first contract. So I think he accomplished that with flying colors. I mean, 13-3, you'll take that every year. Obviously, you want it to end with a Super Bowl, but 13-3 is not something to look past. It's a big deal when you win 75% of your games.
That was a short clip from the Lambeau Lead, Cream City Central's only Packers podcast. Make sure to check it out today.
New faces, new debates, every single week.
He's not great. He had 10 good games right before you put the title great on him.
It's time for Fight Night with Alex Strouf.
Oh, yeah, baby. It's time for Fight Night right here on the Alex Strouf Show. This week's topic is, what is the best division in the NFC heading into 2020? 20 this week, all the way from Delaware. My good friend Michael Bowling will jump on with me. Mike, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you, man?
Everything's all good in my corner, man. So this week, the best division in the NFC. Every time I've had you on this show, you've come on to debate about your Seahawks. You went with the NFC West. It seems like one of only two options. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Tell me why you went that direction.
Well, like you said, it's one of the only two options. You went with the NFC South. Got to go with the NFC West. But for me, I see the top two teams in the NFC West being the Niners and the Seahawks. And I think that they're very equal to the Saints and the Buccaneers in the NFC South. So I call that as a wash. Then I look at the Cardinals being the third best team versus the Falcons being the third best team. The Cardinals improved drastically this offseason, trading for DeAndre Hopkins, getting rid of David Johnson, who was injury prone. So for me, that was a big win for the Cardinals, and they're heading in the right direction in that Cliff Kingsbury offense. And Cliff Kingsbury is finally getting this offense like he had it at Texas Tech with Patrick Mahomes. And then I look at the bottom feeders, and I'm like, Panthers versus Rams. It's a no-brainer. The Rams are a way better team than the Panthers. Panthers, in my opinion, are in the hunt for Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence in the draft next year. I think they're going to be a bad team. Matt Rule has history of taking over teams, and in his first year, he always struggled with Baylor and Temple in college. They had awful years his first year. So I expect the Panthers to be no different, that they're going to struggle. And for talking about a complete division, you got to look at the bottom feeders when the top level teams are so even. So the big difference is the Rams and the Panthers.
That's a really good point, Mike. Yeah, I think the Panthers are a big question mark for me as well. I think you're lower on them than I am, thinking that they're going to be the worst team in the NFL. You're actually not the first person that said that to me. I think Teddy Bridgewater is rejuvenated. We saw that in New Orleans last year. And obviously, we're comparing very different offenses. But Christian McCaffrey still plays for the Panthers. And now you add an elusive quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. Yeah, they lost Luke Kuechly to retirement, so that doesn't help their case so much. But I still think that defense will be competent, and I say that with air quotes. I think they'll be good enough. They will be the worst team in the division. I'm with you, and I agree on the other side. I think the Rams are the worst team in the NFC West, and they lose Todd Gurley, who obviously wasn't all that good. He comes to the South now and adds to that Falcons offense. I think your comparison between the Falcons and the Cardinals is a very interesting one I haven't even thought of. The Cardinals, I won't sit here and lie and say they didn't improve. Adding DeAndre Hopkins, who debatably is a top 3 wide receiver, and we have all 3 teams maybe with the top 3 receivers in this debate. But as a whole, I look at the NFC South, and I still think the Saints run it. I'm not as high on the Bucs as everybody else is. I think they're probably the 3rd best team in that division. I would flip-flop the Falcons. And everybody can come at me and say the Falcons have a trash defense. They have the best 1-2 wide receiver punch in the NFL in Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. And they also have Matt Ryan, a former MVP, and they add Todd Gurley. If Todd Gurley can be even a sliver of his former self that he was 2 years ago, that offense is going to put up points, and they have a very good shot to make a playoffs in an expanded field. When I look at these divisions, I think there's a better chance for 3 teams in the NFC South to make the playoffs than there is the NFC West.
I like that point because I do think the Falcons are a good, solid team, but talent-wise, they should have been in the playoffs the last couple years, but they've been injury prone ever since. Keanu Neal has not been healthy at all. And they've just been injury prone. Believe like last year they started 1-7 or something like that.
Bad.
So they've been injury prone. They haven't been able to figure out how to get over the hump ever since the Super Bowl tragic loss 28-3. So for me, the Falcons are this team that you look at talent-wise, that they're one of the best teams, but they don't produce wins. And for me, I can't put them over the Buccaneers or the Cardinals just because I think Cardinals have more potential of producing than the Falcons do, because we already know the Falcons can't produce.
Yeah, and this is a lot of talk about ceilings, right? We have no idea what's going to happen on the injury side of things, because it will happen, right? I mean, worst case scenario, let's say a guy like Russell Wilson goes down. I mean, obviously, neither of us want that. Me being a Wisconsin guy and you being a Seahawks fan, we want him to go win his first MVP. But at the end of the day, I think when we compare ceilings like this, I'm going to do something that maybe means nothing. But as the great J. Cole once said, history repeats itself, and that's just how it goes. Look at the last 5 Super Bowl representatives from the NFC. They haven't made the playoffs the next year. And obviously with the expanded field, that gives the 49ers a better chance. But playing in a division that competitive, I don't even know if the 49ers can do anything that they did last year. Now, obviously, the news came out today. Deebo Samuel could miss somewhere between 12 to 16 weeks. That's a big blow, but obviously there's plenty of time to figure out with that. I look at Atlanta. We mentioned the 1-2 punch. We look at the 1-2 punch in Tampa Bay in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. And obviously you add Tom Brady to the equation in the NFC South. Look at the quarterbacks, man. You've got Tom Brady and Drew Brees, who are both first ballot Hall of Famers. Hell, Matt Ryan might even be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And Teddy Bridgewater has something to prove. Atlanta also does too. They brought back Dan Quinn after the last 2 horrible years they've had.
Yeah.
This team's going to be fired up if they want him to stay around. I mean, obviously, this is comparing ceilings. Nobody's going to be definitively right until the end of the regular season. But right now, I look at it, I'm much more intrigued by the NFC South.
Yeah, I mean, it's an intriguing division just because there's more storylines coming in.
Yeah.
Like, how is Tom Brady going to cope without Bill Belichick and in a new city and team? That Buccaneers offense might be one of the best ever, that put up the best numbers.
Yeah.
But don't you kind of find it similar to that Eagles offense? Eagles team years ago that was deemed to be like the next
the super team, 2011.
Yeah, the super team. I mean, there's some resemblance in that. Like, the Buccaneers are the next super team. So, I mean, how will that work on the football field? Seems like, for me, basketball, super teams work. But football, it's more like how you cope together. So we got to see how that team copes together.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? And you bring up the 2011 Eagles, and even more recently, an example is last year's Browns, right? We thought that team was just going to be unbelievable, and they just really weren't all that at all. So when you bring in all these interesting pieces, it's interesting to see. I don't think a 9-win year for Tampa Bay is outrageous, whereas a lot of people think they could win 12, 13 games. Realistically, I think they're probably a 9 or 10-win team. I still think they make the playoffs. I think Atlanta's ceiling is the most confusing of any of these 8 teams, right? Because they could win 12 games or they could win 4, and either way, we probably wouldn't be shocked. But I like Atlanta. I think this is a rejuvenated year. I think Todd Gurley, like I said, if he's just a sliver of what he was 2 years ago when he was in that MVP race, he could bring a lot of power to that Falcons offense, bring some distractions away from Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and the aforementioned Calvin Ridley.
Yeah. That Falcons team, like you said, is an interesting team. Like, they got Matt Ryan, who last year was kind of disappointing, which from like what he was 2 years ago and before that, because he had a lot of injuries to his team. And I don't know, this Falcons team, like you said, could win 4 games. They could win 12 games. And none of us will be shocked about. That's just my issue, though, the inconsistency factor to that team. And I don't know. I can't call them one of the best teams in one of the best divisions if they're that inconsistent.
No, that's fair. Mike, we're running out of time, so I'm going to let you make your final round case. The NFC West better than the NFC South. Why?
The NFC West is better because we saw the 49ers make the Super Bowl last year. We saw the Seahawks make the divisional round last year, which they could have made a deeper run if it wasn't for injuries. They were down to their 4th-string running back and tight end come playoff time. Cardinals went up in the offseason, drafting Isaiah Simmons from Clemson, the do-it-all defender. They added the best receiver in the game in DeAndre Hopkins. The Rams, they took a step back, but they still got Aaron Donald, one of the best defenders in football. Jalen Ramsey, one of the best corners in football. Cooper Kupp, in my opinion, one of the most underrated receivers. And watch out for Cam Akers, guys, because Florida State, last few running backs have shown that they've done great their rookie year. Devonta Freeman and Dalvin Cook have been the last two. So watch out for Cam Akers in that running back position.
On a side note, I was also a very big fan of Cam Akers. I was hoping the Packers went after him, but obviously they went the direction of A.J. Dillon, which I'm thrilled with. But anyway, back on topic. My last wrap-up would be this. When I analyze divisions, I think we all look to the sexy positions, right? Especially quarterback. I will take Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, and Teddy Bridgewater over Jared Goff and Kyler Murray and Jimmy G every day of the week. Obviously, Russell Wilson, probably the best going into 2020 of all 8 quarterbacks in this conversation. But when I look at the NFC South, the offenses are run by their quarterbacks, and there's 4 solid veterans in the NFC South. And I think any team could really make a run, whereas I don't see that being the case in the NFC West. Mike, thanks so much for jumping on with me, man. Always good to chat with you.
Thank you, man.
That's Michael Bowling, all the way from Delaware, student at Oklahoma State as well. He's all over the country, and he joins us here on the Alex Strouf Show. Good stuff from him. We're going to jump to a break on the other side. Kyle will give me his thoughts on the debate. We'll do our Thursday thoughts and wrap up the week. This is the Alex Strouf Show, presented by CCC.
He is the top 5 right tackle in the league. There's no question. If you would have told me the Packers could have signed a top 5 right tackle in the league, I'd been like, yes, please do it. But clearly Brian Gutekunst had other ideas, and we've seen guys leave the Packers and then kind of fade away. Maybe 1 or 2 years later. Perfect example, Clay Matthews got released by the Rams. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Demarius Randall, Deshaun Kaiser. I mean, there's been a few guys who kind of just faded away after they left the Packers, and that tells me that Brian Gutekunst does have a good gauge as to where his roster's at. Yeah. So the argument for leaving Bulaga alone, letting him go to the Chargers, is because, so let's say the Packers have $30 million to spend, and they did not spend it on Bulaga. They actually saved money sending Bulaga out to the Chargers, or not sending him, but letting him walk, and signing Christian Kirksey and Rick Wagner. Together, those 2 players, their contracts equals $24 million. So they save roughly about $6 million. And you know what? They even add, let's just throw Mercedes Lewis contract in there. It's $2.25 million. So you still got looking at about 3.5. So it's interesting to see kind of the way these numbers work. And Bulaga's contract alone would have covered all 3 of those players. So I think that's where Brian Gutekunst does the math.
The Lambeau Lead, Kern City Central's official Packers podcast. Download wherever you get your podcasts.
That music has just got me dancing over here, Kyle. Welcome back into the Alex Strouf Show. You need to unmute your microphone, Mr. Hoffenbecker, because you're horrible at doing that. And we are going to wrap up the week. It's been a fun one, man. It's been a really, really fun one on the show.
You know, I think we've said that 3 weeks in a row now.
It's always fun, man. We've got killer guests every week. It's hard not to say it's been a fun week when it's been, actually, I'll tell you this. I woke up next to my girlfriend this morning, and the first thing I said when I woke up today was, great eyes, Kyle. I said, I clapped my hands as I have every Tuesday and Thursday for the last 3 weeks. I've clapped my hands right when I get up. I'm full of energy, as I always am. And I said, big show today. And she looks at me, she goes, you say that every time you have a show. I'm like, well, it really is a big show today, Taylor. Like, I've got Andy Herman, I've got the new coach at GB, Will Ryan, and obviously Fight Night was a lot of fun with Mike. So let's dive into that, and then we'll backtrack through the rest of the show. Fight Night, what's your takeaway?
Alex, unfortunately, I think you're dropping to 1 and 2 on these Fight Night debates. Before we talked today, or before we went on the show today, you told me that the reason why you take these debates, or you take the losing take right away, because you want to up your debate skills, which I totally respect. I totally get. And I think that depending on who you're listening to, who being me, that you could argue the NFC South. I always, when I went into this, when I came up with the topic for this fight night, I thought of the NFC West right away. That's just the first division that popped into my head. I mean, Michael came up with some great points. I mean, he broke down the teams. Falcons versus Cardinals. That was great. Got to give that to him. That was really good stuff.
He started that debate well. He broke it down by tiers, right? Those top two teams and then the bottom feeders is how he looked at it. So I liked how he began that debate. It was a good way to come out the gate for Mike. It was a good upside.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sorry for kind of taking your strategy, but I mean,
yeah, it's all right, man. It's okay.
It is what it is. It gives the viewer a competitive advantage, I think.
Yes, it does.
Right. So that's why you're 1 and 2. So sorry.
I'm okay with it, man. But I guess you make the call. As long as I'm right around 500.
It was competitive. I mean, it was very competitive. I think. I mean, it could swing either way. But like I said, when I came up with this topic, I immediately thought of the NFC West right away, just because I think they're the most likely division to have 3 playoff teams.
I hate how sold everybody is on San Francisco. I'm really not that sold on them, even though they just came off a Super Bowl run. I said that last year about the Rams. I didn't even pick them to be a playoff team last year, and I was spot on. I'm probably going to do that. I don't know. The expanded playoff makes it different, obviously, with 7 teams being in the playoffs this upcoming season. But I'm not as sold on San Francisco as everybody seems to be, just because, they ran all over the Packers. I get that. But I'm still right. They have Nick Bosa, but Jimmy G, he's not that exciting to me. He doesn't do anything spectacular. And to be a consistently good team in this league, it's been proven you need a good quarterback. It's how you win ball games. Look at the past several Super Bowl champions, right? We'll run it down. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Nick Foles, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Eli Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. What else we got? Who was before that? That would have been Pittsburgh. So Ben Roethlisberger. Before that was who? New York again.
So
Eli.
What I think you're getting at is the last time we had like a subpar quarterback win a Super Bowl. You're probably going back to Brad Johnson with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2002.
Trent Dilfer? Was Trent Dilfer after?
Trent Dilfer was before it. Was
before that? Okay.
So Trent Dilfer was 2000.
You could make the case for Nick Foles, I think. Obviously, he's still a backup in this league, just a few years removed. So, or at least we assume, and obviously we talked about that earlier in the hour. But I don't know. I think it's very intriguing to me. I just don't think Jimmy G really gives San Francisco that push. I'm all in on Seattle. I'm still wavering on Arizona. I think they could surprise a lot of people, which I guess a lot of people are high on them, so maybe it won't come as a surprise. But they showed some really good flashes in year 1 with Cliff and Kyler last year.
Before we move on, you look at what happened with the Rams last year, and teams kind of figured out their offensive scheme with how they ran their offense. Who's to say that doesn't happen with the Niners this year? I mean, we have a whole offseason for teams to figure out the power run scheme. Yeah. Do I think the Packers figure it out and stop them? Probably not, because I don't think they have the personnel to do so. But I think teams are actively, thinking like we need to stop this new kind of offense that we're seeing. Yeah. Kind of like the Kyle Shanahan style offense that I think the Packers are going to eventually try and implement into their offense as well. So I think teams are actively trying to figure out how can we stop this type of offense, like what they did with Sean McVay, and how can we stop the Sean McVay style offense, which was successful last season. So I think you do bring up a good point that the NFC or the 49ers are not a lock to make the playoffs in the NFC.
Yeah, and I didn't even bring up the coach's point, right? I'm pretty confident in Sean Payton. I'm pretty confident in Bruce Arians. I'm wavering, obviously. In the past few years, Dan Quinn has given me nothing to be confident about. But he knows he's coaching for his job this year. And if it doesn't go well, we're going to see a similar situation that we saw with Mike McCarthy a few years ago. He's going to get pushed out before the season's over. So he knows he's on his last leg. He's skating on thin ice. And I think the Falcons are going to take that into consideration. And they want to get back to where they were in 2016-17, when they were in the Super Bowl. So I think Atlanta's an interesting team that everybody's really overlooking. I still think they have every capability of being a Super Bowl team. Yeah, I'll go that far. I'm not going to pick them to go there, but I think they have the capability to do it.
Absolutely, I agree. So
great. All right, let's go to Thursday thoughts. Kyle, I'm going to let you go first because I'm going to piggyback on yours.
So I have the banner set for Tuesday thoughts, so I'm just gonna change that quick.
Okay, yeah,
For
just
Thursday
do some
thoughts.
editing while we're talking. That's good,
So,
Kyle. Good
there you
for
go. Look at that magic. It's like TV magic. There you go.
Oh my goodness.
Working in
Amazing.
TV, you learn a couple things about TV and magic. So there you go.
Awesome. Hit me.
So I started this topic on Tuesday, and it's the Twitter polls versus likes, retweets, comments. I've seen it all over Twitter, and since I talked about it, I've seen it exponentially grow with accounts that, big accounts. I'm not going to name names because I'm not like that.
NFL Sunday Night Football.
There you go. Okay, NFL Sunday Night Football did this on Twitter. The like, retweet, comment thing is just a cheap plug to get people to look at your tweets.
Yep.
It is not the correct. I wish I had the tweet up. I'm gonna try and find it as I'm talking. Someone commented on I think Alex, I believe it was your post that you made about this after we talked on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And bear with me. I'm gonna bring this tweet up because it was fantastic. It was a good reply to the tweet. So bear with me here as I find it. Hopefully I do find it. Here we go. Here we go. I found it. So at Connor W96, if you happen to be watching this, you're getting a little shout out here. I also think the issue with these is that the like option always wins. People are more likely to hit the like than retweet something. So there's a good chance someone who thinks retweet is right would just ignore it.
For the record, the tweet that he responded to had more retweets than likes.
Okay,
for the record,
that's fine. Well, that you know why that's not true. The tweet he responded to, or are you talking about the San Francisco 49ers post?
Yeah,
about your
post? It had 1,200 retweets and 1,100 likes.
Okay, well, I get his point. I think it more affects like the comments part of it because people aren't going to comment like, what are they going to comment? It's just dumb. It's just a very cheap plug to get a following.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think it's kind of BS. And polls, you can look at the response right away. You can, if like our Twitter poll, like we'll get to here at the very end, you have to sift through all the comments. Likes and retweets are kind of easy to figure out because you can see the number, but comments you'd have to sift through all the comments and figure out. And not all the comments are necessarily like people will comment, "Oh, I'm going with the retweet option." Like that's just counterproductive.
Right, exactly. It is counterproductive. So on that note, I will vow right now, any social media trends that are stupid, I will officially go to war for you, Kyle. Any ones that you find dumb from now on, because the last 2 days, as you've noticed, the last 48 hours, I've gone to war on many accounts that have been doing the stupid trend.
So one thing you will not see with Cream City Central, or specifically with the Alex Strouf show, you will never, ever, ever see a like, retweet, comment poll. If you do, come find me. Because
we got to end it then, man. That's when I want the show to be done. So anyway, let's take a final look at our Twitter poll before we call it a week. Our final results with a minute left. 67.8% say yes, thumbs up to the DH in the NL. 23.7% say no, and 8.5% say they don't care. So there you go.
I do want to bring up one comment that we had earlier in the show when we brought this up the last time. Markel Willis said more runs, more fun, in reference to the universal DH, and I do agree with him that more runs are more fun. If you're a baseball conventionalist, obviously you're not a fan of that. But if you're a baseball conventionalist, you're probably not thinking that the universal DH is a good idea anyway. So there you go.
Well, you watch American League Baseball, so I don't understand what your issue is with it in the NL. Stop saying it's a freaking sad day for baseball that we're adding a DH. Unbelievable. I'm done. That's producer Kyle. I'm Alex Strouf. Big thanks again to Andy Herman, Michael Bolig, and Coach Will Ryan for jumping on with us today. We will see you again on Tuesday for what I hope is another fun week. I'm Alex Strouf. Thanks for stopping by.